Hello viewers and learners of the module and the course related to MEV 002, and this is the course Environmental and Occupational Hazards. I introduce myself as Dr. Sushmita Bhaskar, working in the discipline of Environmental Studies at the School of Interdisciplinary and Transdisciplinary Studies, Indira Gandhi National Open University, New Delhi. We will now discuss the occupational hazards that are associated with forestry. So in the earlier sessions, we have discussed about the occupational hazards that are faced in the entire agriculture and in the allied sectors, and that could include working with the livestock, working with the poultry, working with planting of the trees and so on. So many sectors that we have discussed, and we have also discussed certain hazards like the inhalation of the dust or inhalation of certain infectious organisms. Now let us see in particular to forestry, what are the occupational hazards that the farm workers and the employees can face with. So after listening to and reading this module, you should be able to explain the various hazards that are faced in the forestry sector. So forestry continues to be one of the most hazardous industrial sectors in most of the countries. So around the world, there are discouraging trends of rising accident rates. There can be high incidence of occupational diseases and also early retirement among the forestry workers because they are infected with certain infections, and they are unable to work anymore. I mean, they have some joint pain, skeletal pain and so on. And it has been discussed that the logging workers, those who are involved in that profession, they had the highest fatal work injury rate. Now, in the mechanized logging, the highest accident rate results from equipment maintenance and repairs and manual logging of the remote areas. Falls can also occur when the body parts are pinned between logs or equipment, whereas struck by injuries can occur from falling trees, branches, rolling logs or kickback from the power source. The occupational health and safety issues, they often include, that is, which is associated with the forestry activities. They primarily include the physical hazards. In the physical hazards, it could be due to weather and climate. It could be due to the motor manual work, noise and also vibration. There could also be chemical hazards. There can also be biological hazards, and finally, but not really fatal, but there can also be certain machine hazards, and that also can cause certain harm and injury to the parts of the agricultural workers. So machine safety also is an important part of the work. Injuries specifically, they can arise from physical hazards. It could be from the noise, from the uneven ground, then the forest debris, obstructions and also extreme weather. So from all this, the physical hazard can arise. Motorized vehicles and heavy machinery, including the ATVs, loading and transporting can also give rise to hazard. The tools that are used for cutting and moving the trees and felling them, they can also result in injuries and hazards. Other safety hazards such as the fire and the electric power lines, they can also result in certain hazards. So now if I have to explain this a little more, when the motorized vehicles and the heavy machinery are used, sometimes the workers get affected with injuries when they are transporting certain trees from one place, like cutting the logs of wood from one place to another. And the motorized machinery can also be used to cut the trees. So there again, they can be, if they are not wearing the proper gloves or the equipment, then the sharp particles, they can even enter their eyes, and the machines can also even give cuts and bruises on their hands. So they need to know how to operate those machines also in the proper way. Then there can be fire hazards. So in a forested area, there is also a chance of forest fire. So fire hazards also they should know how to deal with, and the electric power lines, sometimes they can be disrupted, the power lines can fall, they can also be a cause of the fires which are occurring. So numerous health complaints by the forestry and the logging workers, they have resulted from the work related exposures, and they are known as the ergonomic hazard. They include machines with significant ergonomic deficiencies. So those machines which are having those deficiencies, then they have resulted in the work related exposures and the ergonomic hazards. Then mental health is also affected because continuously when they are doing, sometimes there may be psychosocial problems, there can be drug abuse and substance abuse also among the workers. And sometimes for gaining that energy, they need to take these things, and even alcohol usage is also there, and certain medicines also they can take, like drugs, which can also give them a kind of a stimulant action so that they are able to perform better, but finally mentally they are stressed out, and they have certain other medical problems. In the same way, there can be bullying and power imbalances, and the loggers have been recognized in the forestry industry as a worker safety and health issues that actually needs to be addressed. Now, the forest sector has a range of chemical hazards, because here again they are using lot of chemicals. They could be pesticides, weedicides, insecticides, the fungicides. So all these are a mixture of the chemical compounds or chemical components, and when these are exposed, and when the worker is exposed to the fumes with these, then they can have certain problems and the occupational hazards. They can cause certain allergic reactions that can be inhaled, that can be ingested when they are eating their food, if they don't wash their hands properly before eating their food, or if they are not wearing the gloves. Then again that can also settle onto their face, on their hair, on their skin in the long run, because they are doing this on a daily basis. And again, for any exposure of any contaminant, the route of exposure is important. The time to which you are exposed to the contaminant is important, and also the rate at which and the amount of that the chemical that you are exposed to and how much is being used. That also forms an important aspect. Then again, the chainsaw use, so all this also creates certain other hazards. So these biological hazards, like all these agents which are being used, they may not be toxic to the to the plant themselves sometimes, but for example certain plant species, like certain animal species like insects, even they are vulnerable to the attack of these insects and or the mollusk and certain other species, the arthropod borne species. So that it can attack the human beings, so that they are exposed to certain insect bites. For example, scorpion, they can release certain poisonous material in your blood. So then the forest workers are actually affected by all these biological hazards and the agents. Now, typical occupations in silviculture, this can include the tree planting, fertilization, weed and the pest control, and also pruning of these species. So tree planting is very seasonal, because every day you don't plant a tree. You have the evergreen ones, you have the deciduous ones. So the farmers, the farm workers, they know when it is the right time to plant a certain tree during the seasonal variations. And in some countries, this involves a separate group of workers who are exclusively dedicated to this activity alone. And here again, the workers can have a number of problems. They could have certain dermatitis, there could be certain infectious worms or parasites in the soil, or microbial agents that can all and that can enter the nails of the fingers. So again, and also through the cuts and bruises in the body, they can enter the human system. So all this can give rise to certain biological infectious agents entering their body and being a hazardous agent. In harvesting, so here you are seeing that there is this logging of the wood, such a big tree trunk is being cut, and the most common occupation are the chainsaw operation, where the tropical forest, there they have certain assistants. Then the choker setters who are attaching the cables, the tractors, they are pulling the logs to the roadsides. Then there are helpers also who measure, move, load and debranch the logs. Then there are machine operators also for the tractors, for the loaders, for the cable crane, then harvesters and loading trucks. So different people are engaged in different activities just for one activity alone, and each one needs to know how to manage that technology well, or manually, or using mechanized things. At each point, everybody can be exposed to certain occupational hazards. Now, the forestry work has to be done outdoors. It is not an indoor profession. It is not an indoor artificial creation of plants or bonsai plant and so on. So it has to be done outdoors. So they are exposing them to all the extremes outside. It could be the physical, chemical and the biological hazard. So workers are exposed to the extremes of the weather. Now weather extremes can range from very heat and hot, so there they can get dehydrated and they need to keep their body hydrated, and they need to drink water, lot of water, to keep themselves cool. They can even wear certain hats, sun hats, to prevent them from the heat, and they can also use certain moisturizers and certain sunblock creams, so that they do not get exposed to the heat, which can cause rash and other allergic reactions of the skin. The same way cold, it is not that maybe India we are having, it is a tropical country and we have a lot of sun. There are countries where there is cold, and here there are the temperate forest and other the Arctic forest, the tundra. So in all these places also the cold is also another factor where the workers are exposed to. Here again they need to be properly protected with certain coats and jackets and hats, then ear mufflers, this also is important. Snow and rain, so that means that their foot gear also should be properly equipped, because they can skid and fall in the rainy situation. Ultraviolet radiation, so you know that radiations are very harmful to the body, and since they are always working in the field from morning to evening, then the ultraviolet radiation that can cause certain types of skin cancer. You have the UVA, UVB and other radiation. So they may be exposed to these kind of radiations. And what does radiation cause? It can give rise to DNA changes. It can result in mutations where the DNA in the body, that can the segments that can be mutated, and then there can be a functional problem where an amino acid may not be coded properly working in your body for making that specific protein. So these are certain outcomes on a long term where mutation and mutagenesis can take place due to ultraviolet radiation. So the work even proceeds in bad weather, and in mechanized operation it increases even during the night. Sometimes you see that the workers even work in the night with artificial light. So they can also get blinded, they may not be working properly, and that can also result in certain hazards. Then the workers are exposed to natural hazards like the broken terrain, mud, there can be dense vegetation, there can be series of biological agents also which are disrupting and creating certain problems. Now let us see each of the hazards separately. So physical hazards, here the first we come to weather. So they work outdoors and they can be densely forested areas. Now when I say densely forested areas, so the trees are close to each other, there is a thick canopy that is surrounding them, and they may be exposed to even certain wild animals that are roaming there. You can have the jungle cats, you can have jungle animals, you can have the elephants, you can have certain jackals, or the wild dogs, wolves. So many things are over there. In addition to the all other organisms from the kingdom Animalia. Unfavorable conditions can also create certain problems. Heat. Now normally what does heat do? Heat, you all know that when you are exposed to extreme heat, it can give rise to certain rash or skin dermatitis. The skin can turn red in color, there can be irritation, there can be itching. Then that can also increase your heart rate, and the metabolic activity also can be increased. And because of heat, continuously when you are exposed to heat, then that can also result in certain metabolic disorders. So you tend to sweat profusely, and the loss of the body fluid also occurs. That is why the heat also, sometimes the people can get the heat stroke and attack. So that is why they need to hydrate their body well, and they need to drink a lot of water in order to keep their body cool and protect themselves from the heat stress. Next is cold. The muscles hurt and they do not function properly when they are exposed to very cold conditions. Okay, even in winters, if you have seen, sometimes we are unable to do work. Even small things like even washing your clothes or washing the vessels in cold water, that can actually make everything numb. It can make your fingers. So you need little bit of a warm water in order to function more efficiently. So that means cold can also, it can hurt your muscles, it can hurt your joints, and you are not able to function efficiently. So that results in a poor functioning. So there is a increased risk of the musculoskeletal injuries, accidents, all this can increase because they turn numb when you are working in snow or in inclement weather conditions. In that case, your hand or your leg, they may not be cooperating for the entire body to take up its occupation and what work output that needs to be done. So increased energy demand is required to keep the body warm. Rain also can make the terrain slippery, and especially if they are working on the mountainous areas or those which are at an angle, then in that case that can lead to certain slips and falls, accidents, and this inclement weather can make the occupation more risky. Now, there can also be other hazards like from the thorns, from the twigs, from the branches, the plant and the tree allergens. So, the thorns and the twigs, okay, these can actually pierce their body parts. They can bring about bruises, and there again they can be problematic. Plant and tree allergens, this we have discussed in another module, but sometimes when you go near certain plants like the cedar or the oak, the elm and the nettle, the sagebrush, so there are so many trees, and even certain like Bermuda grass, all this when they are handling such kind of the plant material, and even Parthenium, that also produces a toxin which is called as parthenin. So, all this can also be a form of plant and tree allergens, that even when you go near it you feel like sneezing, coughing, and then when you inhale them that can create problem, and dermatitis and a strong itching and redness of the skin and rash also can occur. Now, equipments. So, we all know that equipments create noise. Some of the equipments may be like our laptops and certain other soundless when they have this noise mufflers that are used, then in that case maybe the vibration and noise will not be heard. So, that is why when the workers are using the handheld machines like the saws, the power brush, the cutters, all that, either there is vibration, a lot of vibration on their hand, and when they are doing it on a regular basis then the problems get aggravated. And then for the noise they can always use certain noise mufflers and the ear packs and the earbuds, so that because the noise level of these chainsaws or these equipments and regularly it can exceed 100 decibels. Every day if the workers are exposed to such high noise levels for 2 to 5 hours every day, then the condition can increase. Hand arm vibration. So, here in this figure you can see how they are cutting a portion of the tree, or how the tree is being cut using certain mechanized equipments. So, this occurs with the use of the chainsaws, and white finger disease is the disease that is given, which is a major problem for some of the forest workers who are operating the chainsaws. So, in all these, the whole body vibrates. For example, the movement of cranes, vibration from the power transmission, and also the speed of the machine is also a very important aspect, because the speed at which you are operating the machines. And this will not only lead only to the problem related to the hand or the forearm, or the shoulders and the ball and socket joint or the elbows, but the workers can also be faced with the lower back pain, because they are standing in a specific position and then they are cutting those trees or those branches. So, these vibration can increase the risk of repetitive strain either to the neck, that can create spondylitis and other frozen shoulder kind of diseases. It can have problem to the lower back and slip disc, and also certain problems with the lumbar and the spine region, shoulders, the arm and the hand. So, all these can be affected when they repeatedly and repetitively use such machines every day. So, what are the control and the precautions that can be done? They can wear safety helmets. The workers need to be equipped with safety footwear. Hearing protection is very important. Then eye protection, because the dust particles and those fine particles can actually pierce the eye, and they can even tear away, and in certain cases bleeding can occur, because the eye tissues are very soft, and in some cases when the particles they can even rupture the retina part. Then in that case it will involve a minor or major surgeries, and then the safety gloves, that is also a very important thing that the workers need to use, because the safety gloves will give them protection to their hand, and from being certain cuts, and the gloves also need to be a little bit longer, so that it can be protected up to their elbows. The legs have to be protected. If you have ever seen, they will not wear the normal shoes, but they need to be equipped with the boots, and that boot also it will come up to the ankle, that is the knee of the leg. So that, and they are actually thick, and they are heavy duty boots and the soles, so that they can work on any rugged surface or any, so that they are preventing themselves from any slip and any fall. So, these are certain, and the same way even when they are spraying certain chemicals or pesticides, the eyes will be exposed. So, even the chance of eye clouding and cataract formation, all this also need to be taken care of. So, the eye protection is also very important, so that they protect. Now, the chemical hazards are there, like fuels and oils for the machines. Okay, these are also sources of the exhaust emission. Then they need lubricating oil and fuel. They can create hazard, and they can also create problems of the upper respiratory tract and the eyes. Then these are certain chemicals like to control fungi, insects and rodents like phenoxy herbicides, glyphosate and triazines. Then the organophosphorus and organochlorine compounds can be used. Dithiocarbamates, these are normally used to protect the softwood seedlings against the fungus and pines. So all this can cause skin disorder, respiratory disorder and other risk to the health. Biological hazards, when they are exposed outside, we have already discussed, but still there can be certain allergic reaction to the plants, and that may come from the wood and the wood products, bark, the sawdust and also pollen of certain plants. Injuries can also result from the sharp twigs, branches, and the cuts and bruises can result in further complications. Poisonous snakes. Snake bites can also lead to emergency. They need immediate treatment, and identifying the type of snake is also important, and the venom has to be removed. Bees, wasp and ant, this is very common among the forest workers, so they are hazardous, and removing the stinger from the skin, that is first the important step, because otherwise it will keep liberating that liquid histamine. So first aid, local cooling, anesthetic, antihistamines, all this are needed, and they should keep them with them as safety. Finally, forest fires. They are a common emergency situation encountered in forestry. More than 90% of the fires are caused by the human factors. Smoking, fuel leaks, vehicles, forest camps, they are the usual cause. They are extremely dangerous because of inflammable materials, sudden wind changes and also inaccessible terrains. They are also unpredictable, and they can move according to the wind and the wind direction and speed, and they can also result in serious injuries, fatalities, and fires also cause burns and respiratory and eye irritation. So, dear learners and the viewers, we have discussed about the various hazards that are faced in the forestry sector, and control is very important. If the fires and all that can be detected early, then it is easier and safer to extinguish. And the firefighters, hazards which are associated with this need to be tackled properly, and the workers need to be equipped with the proper protective equipments. Therefore, controlling and risk assessment of the situation is very important. Process of evaluating the risk to the employee's safety and health from the workplace hazard, and we have discussed it could be from the physical, the chemical or the biological hazards. So you need to assess the risk, and this is a systematic examination of all the aspects of the workplace. So when we go to the control, the machine safety procedures, these have to be in place. For example, the brakes, the tires, the steering and other control systems of that machinery, all this has to be in proper working order. There has to be periodic maintenance of these machines, and then they have the maximum mass load, and that should be clearly marked on all the lifting machinery for those forest activities. And another important factor is they have to be operated by the competent operators. Employers, what can they do? They need to provide and maintain safety, identify the hazard, evaluate the risk, take steps to mitigate all hazards and provide the personal protective equipments to their employees. They need to provide information, training and supervision and do that efficiently. Enforce health and safety measures at their work and workplace. Ensure that every person obeys the policies and the acts. Thank you for your patient listening.